Welcome to Wednesday morning on the Stansbury Show. We're online for you at WRQK.com. That's where we host the podcast. Now, unfortunately, what does not go in the podcast any longer is New Turd Tuesday. There is a streaming music issue versus playing stuff over the air versus putting it in a podcast issue. There's just there's some issue, and apparently I'm not allowed to do that anymore. But what is in the podcast is the local want to hear the podcast. For anybody who could not be with us at 9 a.m. to hear it, they want to be able to share that with their friends and their family and the like, and I understand that. 6 whole months is our local artist from yesterday. The song was Hawkins High. I felt like it was the best song of the day. And like the pop punk thing's not necessarily my favorite thing, but like this was pretty good. Like people just casually said, oh, it's a little Green Day. I think it's more Blink than Green Day, but okay. But like, if those are the two bands you're going to, then they did it right. This was not good. John just doesn't even sound all that great anymore. I mean, welcome to aging. I don't know about this one, man. Now, I am looking forward to their documentary out on Hulu next month, I believe. I'll watch that, for sure I will. Yeah, I didn't hear that one. Tyler Hubbard gave us Vegas. I believe Tyler Hubbard of Florida Georgia Line fame. And you know what this is. Met her, love at first sight. And a lot of people have been there. I've been there. And so you can understand it. I didn't think it was all that good. Now he's a hit maker, and country radio is going to add new Tyler Hubbard. For sure they are. You know, a lot of people were on the easy paint by numbers thing, and like I was a little critical of that yesterday, and that's kind of crazy by me because I will use that as a way to kind of describe something. Although I think we've been a little too guilty of it. Me, you, everybody. There is a formula to making a hit. Like there is. There's a computer program. This came out in like 2009. There's a computer program that can listen to hits and break it down and tell you. It's an AI program, essentially what it is, and tell you what about it is in that kind of makes it a hit. There is a formula to it, right? And, I tell people all the time, what most artists aren't trying to be the most complicated artists of all time. They're not. They're trying to be accessible, right? They want an easy point of entry for you. And so I think that's what most pop music is going to be, and that's what country music has been for as long as I've been alive. Is pop music. That's what it is. It's what most music. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, like metal and hard rock, right? Like people are always on Metallica about how they sold out. If you really go back and listen to Kill 'Em All, like the two thrash albums, everybody will tell you the two greatest thrash albums of all time are Bonded by Blood by Exodus and Metallica's Kill 'Em All, right? If you listen to those records, I think they sound dramatically different. Metallica's more groovy for sure. It's fast, yeah, I'll give you that. But James is easier to understand. He always was. Out of every band in that scene, they were always something different than the rest of those bands. That's why they broke that much faster than everybody else. That's why they broke wide and were playing Day on the Green before any of those bands got famous at all. And it's because they were something different. there is something to it, right? So I think the paint by numbers thing is it's an accurate way to point something out. I think it's become too easy of something that we say when we don't like something. When it's like, well, that's how hits are made. And I don't think most people are going out of their way not to make you hits, right? There's only so many Rushes out there. We also had new POD, Afraid to Die. I like the hook of this, but the song overall did not work. And I like them too. Going all the way back to like Southtown. This part didn't work for me. I thought the chorus was pretty good, but we ended up voting. I think it was half a turn on that. Now, we're going to talk music today on the program, as a matter of fact. Because I ran across an article yesterday at Forbes that tells me they know definitively now what is the biggest song of all time. Not best, what is the biggest song of all time. I'll tell you the band is Journey, and we'll get there coming up at 8 o'clock. And people yesterday on the socials were like, that's not even their best song. I agree. Best and biggest are going to be different. When they say biggest, they're actually using sales and streaming metrics. I looked at this article a little closely last night to make sure I was right about this. They used both sales and streaming metrics, and I'm actually going to get into the difference between those two a little bit today and why I think sales, physical sales, is still superior to streaming. There's an easy reason why I want you to believe it is, and we'll get to that. We'll do that at 8 o'clock this morning on the program.
It's cool when you get up and you feel instantly connected to the world.
The Stansberry Show.
I don't know what it is. I got them on every morning.
On Rock 106.9.
9 a.m. this morning. We'll get into the one thing they say most men are self-conscious about. I got to be honest with you. When I read this last night, I'm not sure I believe it. I don't think most men are self-conscious about this, but according to some data they have, they say that we are. So we'll get there coming up at 9 o'clock. I think I disagree. I did also see this. There are some divorce proceedings in China that are, garnering attention all the way over here. Back in 2007, a man had married a woman about 8 years younger than he was. Now, people do that all the time. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Now, to him, she seemed like normal, down to earth, and his parents had been pressuring him. Settle down, get married. We talk about that a lot, right? Sometimes people don't get married for the right reasons. They get married because society tells you that you should, or your parents are looking for grandkids, whatever it should be. But plenty of people get married from outside pressure versus what it is they actually want to be doing. So he had been pressured to get married, met this woman. She's beautiful. He feels like she's great. So next thing you know, they get married. She then informs him that she is pregnant. This is after they had gotten married. He's so happy with the news that he was going to be a dad, as I would imagine that's how most men feel about that he never even stopped to think about the fact of, well, let's do some math here. Like, she had to have been pregnant before we had gotten married or got together. But again, so overwhelmed by the news, I'm going to be a dad, that he just kind of forgot about it, according to him. So she then gives birth to their first daughter. And apparently he took a job like driving over the road as a truck driver. He was gone a lot. And he'd be home short periods of time. So they're married for a few years. Next thing you know, they have another daughter. As plenty of you have, right? Had a kid, a couple of more years, let's have another kid, and that's kind of how it goes, right? That's what married people do. It's what they do. He was a little suspicious, but she had just, he said, nah, I just, assumed that child was mine, right? But he was a little suspicious that something could be going on here. I'm not home a lot. I'm only home, sparingly, and then all of a sudden this seems to be a thing that's happening. So back in 2019, he was starting to get a little suspicious about it. So then she gets pregnant again. But he now knows for sure, I wasn't home during the time period of when this child would have to have been conceived. And so I think it was late 2022 where he started to really become convinced none of these kids are mine. And again, he then finds out, sure enough, she had been having an affair with another man. So again, if I'm reading this correctly, these kids are all his, not, meaning the person she was having the affair with, and not her husband's, right? So then he gets a lawyer, goes to the hospital to investigate after the fourth kid is born. And sure enough, he learns that she had given birth to a girl there. But the release form then featured his name as the father as well as a forged signature, meaning she had forged the signature. So you fast forward now, and he's leaving this woman after 16 years of marriage and finding out that all of these children, none of them are his. And people are shocked that this guy wants out. There's a few things here. There are people who are going to go, I don't feel bad for him more. Should have done the math in the beginning of the first one. Okay. Okay. A lot of people are going to somebody else. That's what they're in it for. Do you need to be suspicious of these types of things? Sure. I'm just going to guess there's probably, what, 10% of you? That's probably a little high. Who maybe have kids with somebody else and you're thinking to yourself, is that my kid? Right? So I don't know if we get to completely judge the guy for staying with her. He was excited. He thought he was having kids. But now people are on him for leaving her. And I don't understand it. She left him. She just didn't leave. You can leave people without packing up your things and moving out. She left him. First of all, she was never with him. She never gave this marriage a fighting chance, not even a little bit. She wanted her cake and she wanted to eat it too. And now, because he's like, these ain't my kids, and I know for sure now, I'm gonna hightail it the hell out of here. This is now being positioned as he's the intolerant. I've seen plenty of videos online of women saying, of women saying, if you find out the baby's not yours, you should still take care of it as if it's yours. Well, I disagree with that. I think you could do that. I think people get together all the time. Stepmoms and stepdads are a thing. That's a thing. But if somebody has had a baby behind your back while being in a committed relationship with you, if we're going to allow people to separate, if we're going to allow divorces, and I think we should. I don't like the idea of you being forced to be with somebody. I don't like that. So if we're going to allow these types of things, and we should, then the reasons you're able to get in and out of them, if running around on me and having children behind my back that aren't mine and presenting them to me as if they were, I think is a good enough reason for a woman to be left, right? I'm hearing a lot, and I'm not hearing it, but I was reading a lot in comment sections yesterday of women and I don't think this is most women. I think these are the kind of comments that get pushed to the top of comment sections, but a lot of women talking about how this is toxic masculinity running amok. It's no. This is toxic femininity running amok. She was under the impression she found an absolute dupe who she could get to do anything she wanted, go leave me half the year to go work over the road, and I'll do whatever the hell it is I want. Now, a lot of people were giving her, leeway on that. Well, that's what you get for leaving and going on the road. That's what you get. Really? Is that what an athlete's allowed to do because the job requires him to go on the road? What? He's on the road. He's away from her. So is he allowed? Well, no, he's making the tree or world. Yeah. She made the choice to be with a man who had that job. For better or worse. For richer or poorer. In good times and bad. It's literally written in the vows.
And you know what that conniving trickery is called?
The Stansberry Show on Rock 106.9.
Welcome back to the Stansberry Show. Apparently Journey's got the biggest song of all time. We'll get there at 8 o'clock. I got a few suggestions up my sleeve that I was surprised weren't a little closer to the top there. They used a couple of different metrics to get this number. We'll talk about that too. I think sales got together, right? They met, got together, fell in love. Next thing you know, they're married, and apparently she may have, had been impregnated before that had happened, right? He's an over-the-road truck driver. He's coming home short spurts. Next thing you know, he's got a couple of kids, and he said he started to get a little suspicious. I think it was kid number 2. And then as the years went on, he started to go, well, this isn't right. And then I think it was the last one where she had become pregnant when he was out of town. And he was like, okay, well, then something's up here, right? And so some paternity tests were done. Sure enough, kids aren't his. And he's leaving. People are up in arms about it, right? And I should tell you this, that apparently the woman, the female in the relationship, has accused him of domestic violence. There's been some investigation. She also claims that he had hit her mother after finding out what had happened. He said, look, there was an altercation, absolutely. And he does say that he suffered a moment of, what did he say? Emotional distress is what it was. So he kind of talks about that. And he also referred to it as an uncharacteristic fit of rage, which I got to tell you is not a strong denial that you didn't hit somebody, right? Like, that's not a strong denial of that. I think you're justified in leaving the woman over this. I think hitting her mother over it is too far for me. But I think you're totally justified in leaving somebody who has lied to you this casually for as long as she did. Now, where it gets tough is the children. Because you love those kids. You did. You loved them as if they were your own. I don't think that goes away when you find out that your partner did you dirty. I don't see that. I just don't. It's like, I mean, I know kids aren't puppies, but like if you bring a puppy home, inside of 30 minutes, you're like, I love this thing, right? And like, I want to make sure it stays alive. And I think taking care of a kid, being close to a kid, no matter what happens, you're going to have that connection. Now, they're young, right? But I think this guy's going to lose more than once now. Because he's going to lose his marriage that he didn't really have. Fair enough. All right, I'll meet you there. But now he's going to lose these kids and the happiness that came with it. Sucks for him, right? Now, again, I didn't see the video of him hitting her mother or whatever, and if I saw that, I'd probably be like, screw him, I don't care what happens to him, right? Like, that would probably happen too. But so many people are defending this woman now via the internet. And I tell you this all the time. That's the crazy thing about the internet, is that if people agree with you on the internet, don't believe that that just means you're right. When we first invented that thing, what would your mother tell you about it? Oh, don't go on there. Don't talk to them. The crazies are out there. The crazies are still out there. They're there. They're just louder now. But no matter what your view is, you can find a group of people to tell you you're right, and then you'll walk away thinking you're right. She's in the wrong here. You know what Mark wanted to know? He's like, why is everybody on this guy? Everybody's mad at him for running out on her? Where's the judgment of the guy she was having sex with on the side who fathered these kids about him not stepping up to take over this role? Well, that's a good point, and I don't think you're wrong. What I would say is, where I grabbed this story from did not get into that end of the article. Like, they didn't get into that end of the story. As a matter of fact, they didn't really talk about him all that much at all, other than the fact that he existed, and they did give us his name, right? So they didn't really talk about that. So I don't know what his mentality is. He could be sitting there saying to her all along, these aren't even his kids. We're in love. You had these children with me. I need to be near my family. Like, he could be sitting on the sidelines saying all of that, and we don't know it, right? The story is, it's about these two people. And I think this is terrible. And I think good people, man or woman, now it's more likely to be a man, right? Because if you're a woman, it's like, kind of know who got you well, although I say that, but Maury Povich was a show. I mean, I say that, but plenty of you out there flipping the coin on who the baby daddy may be, so like, I don't know about that one, right? But you know, it's one of those things where I don't think the connection is just dropped because of that. It's different. My father was not my brother's father. Now, he knew that. My mom had already had David when he met my mom. And so he signed up for that. And I've always really respected it because David gave him more than he could handle. And it wasn't his kid. He stayed patient and stayed there and fathered and loved and showed and leadership and all of it. Was impressive. Because I think there's a lot of people who would be like, dude, this isn't even my kid and I'm dealing with this. I mean, David put them through the ringer. And part of it was because, you're not my real dad. You don't get to tell me you're not my real dad. It's like, well, no, your real dad was a drunk who hit mom, is a multi-millionaire and refuses to pay for you. Homie over here is the one doing the gig. So maybe ease up on him, Dave, right? Like maybe just a little bit, right? Now, of course, I was 5 years old and I didn't think of it like that. But I mean, he put him through the ringer. And I've always kind of respected that. But he knew the situation he was getting into. That's a choice he had made. I got to be honest with you. You hear stories like this, a woman having 4 kids behind your back with another man, and I'm supposed to like then look at other men and go, nah, dude, paternity tests shouldn't be mandatory at birth. Like, I don't know, man. I mean, aren't we kind of getting to the point where maybe they should? I mean, we've seen men in this country find out kids weren't theirs, and the judge went, tough. You acted like their dad long enough, you're paying. And they continued to have to pay child support after finding this out. Now, what happens when they appeal and all of that, you know what I mean? I haven't kept up with those stories. You know, it's not like I read, the updates on them yesterday. But if that can happen to somebody, and it has happened to people, if that can be a thing, I'm not so sure forced paternity test at birth is necessarily a crazy idea. As a matter of fact, for all the things the government wants to get their hands in on, maybe do that so you can stop the argument between couples. Maybe protect people a little bit. Maybe get in there. You have no problem telling me what I must or must not do, what's healthcare and what isn't. You have no problem exercising your will on anything you want us to do or force us to do. You have zero issue with that. So why don't you get in here and maybe protect couples from one another? Because how many people want to ask this question and won't because of the big turd hanging out in the middle of the room? A lot of people might want to ask the question, but they're like, if I'm wrong, she's never going to trust me on anything ever, right? Like, there's going to be that. So when I hear stories like that, I don't know how I'm supposed to think that, forcing paternity tests at birth is necessarily a out of left field idea. I'm not sure about that.
He's a man of many talents, but he doesn't have the talent for keeping quiet.
The Stansberry Show on Rock 106.9.
By the end of the hour, I'll get you into incarceration. That in July, Ohio State Reformatory. Godsmack, one of your headliners, Breaking Benjamin, Shinedown too. So, you know what? I actually feel like pulling out one of my favorite Shinedown songs today, so we'll do that. And then we'll get, I believe it was Virginia, a teacher went viral. Having talked about the fact that kids are having problems paying attention in school with the cell phone. This is all about text messaging. And when I saw that, I thought for sure, okay, well, it's probably a little texting. It's probably also a little socials, right? Maybe some Snapchatting in there. TikTok's probably the real big app, I would imagine now. The Stansberry Show on all of them for you. And I thought that's what that was going to be about. But it wasn't. And I was shocked by it. So I was like, all right, well, if the cell phone in the classroom's the problem, then it's got to be the cheating. Right? It has to be the cheating. Well, it turns out no. What this teacher in Virginia had been complaining about was not kids and the phones. It was the parents and the phones. He's making the claim that the number one culprit of texting the students throughout the day isn't their friends, girlfriends, boyfriends. It's not that. It's not too much Snap in the classroom. It's not looking up the Cliff Notes for Chaucer. It's not that. What it is parents are texting their kids too often during the school day. They've taken phones away from students, obviously. Different times where they've seen it become excessive, and they've looked into what the text messages are. A lot of people felt like this was an invasion of privacy, and I could see your point. But the teacher is making the point that when looking through these messages, he's seeing texts from parents. And he says it's never all that urgent. A lot of them were, what do you want for dinner? So we'll stop here. Let's take them one by one, because I kind of yada-yada'd over that one a little bit yesterday, but a lot of you really took an issue with it, and that's why another reason why I wanted to talk about it this morning. I wanted to make sure we brought some of these points up. That, your kids shouldn't be deciding what you're having for dinner. That isn't that a problem. You're the parent. You tell them dinner's on the table at 5. You eat this, or you know what I mean, or whatever. Sure, I don't think kids should be deciding what happens, although they do, right? Okay, if you take your kids to the movies to see what they want to see, that was them deciding what you were doing that day, right? I was under the impression that that's what being a parent was so much of the decisions you were going to make is what your kids wanted versus what you wanted for the rest of your life. Now, I know to idiots, that sounds like I just said, they decide everything, you don't get any control whatsoever, just do what the 5-year-old tells you. Because that's what idiots want to believe I said, so they can get out their anger on me on a text. Hi, John. So he'll misunderstand me the way he always does. I'll eagerly await the text message. But that is kind of part of the situation, right? That you are taking what it is into account. For sure you are. Now, I don't want that. Okay, fine. Then this is what we made and eat and all of that. Fair enough. Right? Fair enough. And I would grant you that. I don't think it's crazy to say, hey, this is what we maybe have the option for. What would you rather have, this or that? I don't think that's nuts for a parent to involve their kid in the decision of what they are going to eat and put in their body, right? I don't think it's crazy. Now, one of the other texts this teacher in Virginia was telling us about was, what did you get on that test? And so a lot of you felt like, well, what? That's being a good parent. I want to know. I'm interested in my kids' education. I want to know if they learned everything we were studying. Okay, I get that. And again, being involved in your kids' education, doing their homework with them, being invested in what kind of grades they're getting, I love all of that. That's on the checklist of, good parenting. I like it. I moved that part of the conversation off kids a little bit yesterday and made it about couples a touch because I think there's a similar situation happening. You notice this now? Like back in the day, you would go to work, so would your better half, you'd get together at dinner and be like, how was your day? So often now we text each other so many times throughout the day, that conversation is almost unnecessary now. You know about the day. You got the text messages about the day. I could maybe make a similar argument about parents and their kids and finding out what the test score is. There's a difference between I don't give a damn about it and being willing to wait till 5:30 to hear it. There's a very big, that is cavernous, the difference in those two things, right? And I think that if you're all looking for, and we hear this a lot, more phones down at the dinner table maybe, more communication and more what's going on, that saving those stories for those moments might be a good way to go about it. Having said all of that, if you were going to text your kids about anything throughout the day, outside of an emergency or something that's going on, how you're doing in the classes is probably one of the... I'd rather have you texting them that than whether or not they want cheeseburgers or fish sticks for dinner. I would grant you that. Although you're still taking the attention away from the student. Now, a buddy of mine messaged in yesterday, The Stansberry Show on Facebook. You can do that too. You can also text at 330-450-7625. But my buddy said to me, he goes, I think you have this wrong. Possibly, I don't have children. He said, I work third shift. So I miss a lot of the early morning stuff with the kids and all of that. I miss a lot of that. He's like, so I'll send them some text messages throughout the day while they're in school. I love you, what's going on? Well, I understand where you're approaching this from, it's your experience and this and that. I said, their guide on cell phone and digital, personal digital system use in the school day. And we'll take a look at both of those, okay? I you know what I mean? Can we eat? Will you stop hitting your sister while we eat, right? Like out of that. And at the end of the day, he's like, I don't really care. So if I ask them and that's what they want, then okay, that's what we have. What's the big deal? It's like, are they eating? Do they get nutrition? And I kind of mostly see it that way too. If you're raising kids who won't eat because you didn't give them the one thing that they wanted, now that's a different issue, right? But we had been talking about that a little bit. Also, it was, some of the text message examples were, what did you get on that test? And, a lot of parents were like, well, what's the matter with that? I'm interested. I'm invested in my kid's education. And I see that, and that's what I would want you to be, for sure. I made it about couples, that if you don't text each other all throughout the day, you have something to talk about at the end of the day. I think that's kind of gone. As a matter of fact, John texted in, not the John I'm complaining about, but a different one. There's a lot of Johns out there. And, he's like, you're talking about that. Me and my better half have been doing it. So we have more to talk about at the end of the day. He's like, I'm a fan of it. She doesn't love it so much. And I said, well, that's interesting. I was like, because my better half is actually why we do it. We work very different schedules, right? And so I'm at home all day. She's in meetings trying to make sure everybody has food to eat. And I'm like, hey, did you see this? She's like, leave me alone, you idiot. I'm trying to work, right? And so we have found that when she gets home or done for the day and we kind of get caught up, it's like, oh, great, I get to hear about this now. Versus like, I know, you already told me, right? Like and so we've been enjoying that. It doesn't necessarily the only answers you get out of them, this and that. It's like, that's only going to get worse to the text messaging, I would imagine. So Dan actually listening this morning goes, man, it kind of sounds like, the schools don't know what to do about this phone stuff. He said, I graduated 10 years ago, so he's younger than I am for sure. He said, we were not allowed to have the phones out in class. They wanted us to have them in the lockers during school. He's like, and then they changed that a couple of years after I graduated. You're allowed to have your phone out during class. He said, one of the arguments I think is that, people started talking about the fact school shootings started to pop up more and more. And, the kids have no access to the phone or the outside world when that's going down. So that's what I had said yesterday in the conversation. I said, I'm 99% of the way take the phone away from the kid during class, right? This is bubble gum. It's the Nintendo Game Boy. It's literally it's on another in a long list of distractions for students in the classroom. But then I said, but there's an issue out there. And it ain't rare. If it were more rare, I would have a little bit more ability to say, I think we could still take the phones from the kids. But it's so common that we barely pick our heads up when we see the story. We don't even really gasp at the story until the body count is high enough. Rare that situation is. Still gets headlines. Yes, it's news. It should. But we've almost learned to live with it. We have drills in schools on how to deal with it. Not that rare. And I said, I understand how a parent in that moment wants to hear their kid's voice. Or I want to see my kid's name come across my screen, texting me, telling me they're okay. I don't want to hear from an administrator. I want to hear, yeah, it's going on. Is my son or daughter alive? So I said yesterday, if we want to make that situation more rare, then I can talk about taking the phone away from the kid. But in order to make that situation more rare, we're actually going to have to talk about it, not talk around it. Meaning we're going to issues and warning signs and red flags. We're going to have to take a very complex issue and talk about it versus try to reduce it into something that fits in a hashtag while we lie and tell everybody awareness is the key to fixing it, because it isn't. It will help. It's not the silver bullet. On there when you know how many he said, she said arguments pop up